President Obama today signed 23 executive actions on gun control. We're joined now by Eric Pratt. He's Director of Communications for Gun Owners of America. And Lori Haas, she's a Virginia organizer of the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. Her daughter was shot twice during the 2007 Virginia Tech massacre, and she survived. Thank you both for being with us. I'm going to begin, if I may, with you, Lori. Your reaction to the president's actions today, did it satisfy you, the degree to which he asserted some effort to control guns in this country? I'm
behind the president's efforts to stop gun violence in this country. I believe that we have an epidemic of violence in this country. There is a problem when it's more dangerous to be a preschooler in this country than a police officer. And with the carnage that these high-powered military rifles are doing to our children, you know, I know firsthand what happens. At Virginia Tech, the shooter had a high-capacity magazine and was able to do a great deal of carnage. You know, I got a phone call on the morning of April 16th. My daughter said to me, "Mommy, I've been shot." And that was a horrible day and a difficult situation for my family. But I can only begin to speculate what those families in Newtown, Connecticut, Aurora, Tucson, and other places are going through. Lou, we've got to do something about the gun violence that is visiting horror on American families.
Eric, your thoughts?
Well, Lori was just saying that it's more dangerous to be a preschooler, and indeed it is. I know that firsthand myself. I had a son who drowned. It was the most difficult thing that my family, my wife and I ever went through. But in fact, more children will drown in pools than be killed by guns, and yet my wife and I haven't gone on a national campaign to ban pools or ban access to pools. That would be simply ludicrous, and yet there is an agenda to ban firearms, and we're seeing that coming from the president. We're seeing it all over the nation. Up in New York, the governor up there, Andrew Cuomo, was talking about confiscation being an option. And Lou, I would tell you that's why it's very imperative that these background registration checks not pass, because every background check will give the framework for a registration system, and you can't confiscate firearms without having registration.
And go ahead, Laura.
I'm not sure I quite understand about the registration and confiscation. At this point in time, we're taking measures to stop the gun violence that is affecting the families in America. We understand, and I personally understand. My husband's a gun owner. All the gun owners I talk to understand that the rhetoric around this conversation is just inflamed. No one is taking anyone's guns away. No one is taking away my right to own a firearm. What we are talking about is measures to keep guns from the hands of dangerous individuals. We need a thorough background check system. Cho's records were not in the background check system, and he was able to buy firearms that shot my daughter twice in the back of the head, killed 27 students at Virginia Tech, and 5 instructors on that college campus on a cold and snowy April morning. So we've got to do something. We need to rely on people who are experts, have the conversation, and not go to the extremes that Mr. Pratt is going to. No one is taking my firearm away.
It's already happened. After New Orleans, they confiscated guns from people in New Orleans. Listen to what the governor of New York is saying. He's saying confiscation is an option. In Iowa, a lawmaker is saying we need to take guns from people because they eventually get into the wrong hands. In fact, New York City has already confiscated firearms. They started registering long guns in the 1960s, promised they would never confiscate them, but then under the Mayor Dinkins administration, that's exactly what they did. They confiscated many of they banned them first, and then the New York papers reported that the police were going and taking guns from people. So to say that it won't happen is just ignoring the fact that it already has happened, Lori.
I just think that the subject at hand is how to protect children in America. What do you say to that mother who lost her 6-year-old daughter, her 7-year-old son, her 30-year-old school teacher daughter? There is a violence problem in this country. It is systemic.
No,
it is coming from guns. We have to do a better job. We have to determine the background checks, who's getting them, how they're getting them, and the firepower.
Let me ask you both this question. Lost in this conversation, not ours solely, but ours as part of a larger national conversation right now, is the fact that more people have been killed by hammers and clubs than by rifles, not just assault rifles, but rifles, period, in the course of the past year. The idea that this president is moved, as we all are, by the tragedy in Newtown, the tragedy in Virginia Tech, Aurora, the list goes on, and it is shameful that it does. But the reality is that gun violence in this country and violent crime is now down by a third from what it was in 1994. That is all lost in the conversation. The second part that is lost in the conversation is that whether it's Virginia Tech and the mentally disturbed young man who shot your daughter and murdered others at Virginia Tech was mentally ill. And it was, in the Virginia Tech report, it was clear that it was a horrible failure of security there. It was a horrible failure of communication by the administration. It was a horrible failure on the part of psychiatric professionals. It's a tragedy with broad implications. Do you not agree with that, Lori?
I do. It has broad implications. And in Virginia, we've worked on some of those issues, getting mental health adjudications into the background check system. But we need to use background checks on every sale. What good is it going to do if a person is able to, who has been adjudicated mentally ill, is able to walk down the street and go to a gun show and buy a weapon?
Well, now you use the word adjudicated. That's the NRA's word, and I reject it. Because adjudicated is an entirely different proposition, and it is far too narrow to protect society and our children. So
I happen to agree with you.
I much prefer a different expression.
Well, I happen to agree with you. We need to do a better job at keeping firearms from persons who are dangerisly mentally ill. The mental illness is a broad term, but there are people who can be identified as dangerous.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We've used up all the time, but Eric, you get the last word here.
Could I none of the proposals the president is proposing would have stopped what happened in Connecticut. Adam Lanza killed his victim, stole her firearms. No background check, no gun ban will stop a criminal from doing that.
Eric Pratt, Lori Haas, thank you both for being here. Come back as we continue this discussion.
Thank you for having me.